Pre-Prep. Well, I've got a lovely story to share with you today. It's all about a little boy who finds a penguin. Now, that's an unusual thing to find at home, and I don't think I've ever opened my door and found a penguin, but that's exactly what happens in this story. Now, it's called Lost and Found, and it's by an author, Oliver Jeffers, and I really do like this author. He writes some beautiful stories and with some lovely illustrations as well. So I hope you enjoy it, and then we're going to do some work with this story in a little while. So listen carefully. Once there was a boy, and one day he found a penguin at his door, as you do. The boy didn't know where it had come from, but it began to follow him everywhere. The penguin looked sad, and the boy thought it must be lost. It does rather look very sad, doesn't it? So, the boy decided to help the penguin find its way home. He checked in the Lost and Found office, but no one was missing a penguin. He asked some birds if they knew where the penguin came from, but they ignored him. Some birds are like that. The boy asked his duck, but the duck just floated away. He didn't know. That night the boy couldn't sleep for disappointment. He wanted to help the penguin, but he just didn't know how. The next morning he discovered that penguins come from the South Pole, but how could he get there? He ran down to the harbour and asked the big ship to take them to the South Pole, but his voice was much too small to be heard over the ship's horn. It is a huge ship, isn't it? And if you look really carefully, look, there's the little boy right down there. Very tiny. So together, he and the penguin would row to the South Pole. The boy took his rowboat out of the cupboard and tested it for size and strength. They packed everything they would need, and together they pushed the rowing boat out to sea. There it is, look. And you can see what I mean by these lovely illustrations. It's really very pretty. They rowed south for many days and nights, with the boy telling stories all the way. The penguin listened to everything that the boy said. They floated through good weather and bad, when the waves were as big as mountains. That does look rather scary, doesn't it? Until they came to the South Pole. The boy was delighted, but the penguin said nothing. Suddenly, it looked sad again as the boy helped it out of the boat. Look, we've got the South Pole. Look, there it is. Welcome to the South Pole. The boy said goodbye and floated away. But as he looked back, the penguin looked sadder than ever. It felt strange to be on his own, and the more he thought, the more he realised he was making a big mistake. The penguin wasn't lost, it was just lonely. So quickly, he turned the boat around and headed back to the South Pole as fast as he could. Look, there he goes. Have you spotted what's happening on the other side there, look, of the iceberg? At last he reached the South Pole again, but where was the penguin? The boy searched and searched, but it was nowhere to be found. So sadly, the boy set off home. There was no point in telling stories because there was no one to listen, except for the wind and the waves. But then the boy saw something in the water ahead of him. Can you see, look? What could it be? Closer and closer he got, until he could see, what do you think? The penguin. Look, the penguin's made a boat out of the umbrella. And so the boy and his friend went home together, talking of wonderful things all the way. So that's my story. Lost and Found. Now, the first activity I'm going to ask you to do is to imagine this is your book that you have written and you need to tell me something about it to excite me to read it. Now, when you go to the library or when you go to a bookshop, sometimes you look at the front cover and you think, oh, that looks a nice book. I like the front cover. I think that looks really pretty. It looks really bright and colourful. It looks like it might be about penguins because the clue is in the picture. And I like penguins, so I think I like this story. But also, if you turn a book over, it's got some words here. This is called the blurb, which is a funny word, isn't it? A blurb. Now, the blurb tells you a very, very tiny little bit about the story. And it's just enough to get you excited enough to read the story. And this blurb says this: once there was a boy, and one day he found a penguin at his door. Doesn't tell us the whole story, it just tells you enough, and you think, oh, that does sound exciting. It sounds the sort of story that I would like. Now, in this book, some books have this, but not all of them. When I open the front cover, there's a little bit more of the blurb, so I'll read you that as well. So it says again, once there was a boy, and one day he found a penguin at his door. He didn't know where it came from or who it belonged to. The penguin looked sad, and the boy thought it must be lost, so he decided to help it find its way home, even if that meant rowing all the way to the South Pole. Now, these little bits of information here just tell us a little bit about the story. They don't tell the whole story, but they tell a little bit of it so that we are excited and we want to read it. And it tells us enough about the story. So I would like you to do that. Tell me a little bit about the story. You might choose your favourite part of the story that you want to share, or you might just tell me a little brief outline of the story. So you need to remember the key parts. So who it's about and what happens in it. You don't write the whole thing out, you don't write the whole story, you just write a little bit. So you might say, this is an exciting story about a boy and a penguin and where they go. That tells me enough. It tells me a little bit about it. It doesn't tell me the whole story. I don't want that. I just want a little bit about it. Or you might say, one day a penguin arrived at a boy's house and he didn't know why. You could say something about a penguin being sad. A sad penguin was missing his home and wanted a friend. It can be whatever you choose. Talk to the grown-up that's helping you today and decide on something that would excite me enough to read a story. Now, don't forget, you need to do a really good illustration to entice me into reading your stories again. So have a think about what happened in the story. Choose something from the story that you want to show me. So draw a picture that tells me something a bit about the story and then write your blurb. Okay, have fun. Now don't forget, if it's a bit too tricky to write all of it, you can tell your blurb to whoever is working with you and they can write it for you. But do have a good go sounding out some words and seeing what you can write yourselves. It's a super duper challenge day. Okay, we'll have some more fun activities for this story and I will post them later in the week. Take care. Bye bye.